Hello everyone, and welcome to another week of the Backlog Bunker. This week, to get this one out of the way really quickly, last week I complained about the camera in Final Fantasy VII. In fact, I think I've complained about it multiple times at this point, but I've realized through a friend telling me that you can actually just change the camera in the battle settings to not move, which, makes me feel like a real fucking idiot, but it is what it is, and it can only improve the game from this point on, so there's no complaints from me. It just sucks that I played so much of the game without realizing it. I'm still annoyed that there's no list of enemies, that I do still have to target enemies on the actual battle screen, and I suspect that characters, moving to each other and all that is still going to fuck up the whole thing, but it's better now that I can actually see the entire screen from, whatever point. But now onto a different RPG that I played. I finally played the second good Pokemon game, because the first one is obviously Pokemon Showdown, this we all know and are aware of. But I am now playing Pokerogue, which is the second good Pokemon game, where Showdown succeeds at simulating the mechanically rich parts of Pokemon, that being player versus player battles. Pokerogue is good at simulating the single-player parts of Pokemon, which is going through the whole thing by yourself. Unfortunately, simulating the single-player part of Pokemon is still simulating the worst half of Pokemon, because at least with player versus player battles in the real Pokemon games, you can still have fun with them, they're just way bigger of a time investment than Showdown is. But the single-player content has never been good, so simulating that in a slightly different fashion is only going to get you very, very marginal results, which is how I kind of feel about Pokerogue. Not helped at all by the fact that it's a roguelike, which, as we are all aware of at this point, is not my favorite genre. So far, I like it to an extent because Pokemon is mechanically rich enough to justify treating a run seriously, but my problem so far is that the moment-to-moment gameplay is still lacking, the single-player part of Pokemon. The problem the single-player Pokemon has always faced has been just being really unengaging due to how super effective moves work and how the AI is just never smart enough to play like an actual player, because a lot of the run is just whack the other guy with your strongest move, especially since you're starting the game with, starter level Pokemon, and the enemies are also starter level Pokemon, so you just play the entire thing like the beginning of a Pokemon adventure, which is the least engaging part of a Pokemon adventure. Status moves aren't helpful because you poison one fucking Pokemon, and that's not going to help the rest of your run, because you still have 99 other Pokemon to fight, or, however many. In fact, unless you have no other option, it's actually in your best interest to not use any status effect moves, because the longer you take to fight a Pokemon, the more damage you're going to take from them just whittling you down, and the more you get whittled down, the more money you have to spend on potions, and the more money you spend on potions, the less money you're going to have later for revives, which you will absolutely need, because this game is really fucking hard. I have no idea what I'm doing wrong. When I try to train up an entire team of Pokemon, they end up just a little bit underleveled by the mid-20s, and then I get O-code by whatever random mon happens to show up. If I focus on just one Pokemon, I make it a little bit farther. I made it to the 30s one time, but then I can still get O-code if I end up with a bad type matchup. And because I only have one Pokemon, I don't have the rest of a team to back me up. But even if I did have the rest of a team to back me up, it still wouldn't help very much since I would always be raw switching into damage. Assuming you're playing on set battle, of course. I've been of the belief that playing on set battle is the real way to play Pokemon, because if you play on switch battle, then the game just becomes a complete non-factor. You see what Pokemon's coming in next, you switch into whatever's super effective against it, or at least whatever's not going to get killed by it, and then you just win the game. Playing on switch battle makes everything way, way, way too easy, if you have even a little bit of Pokemon knowledge. But playing on set battle in a regular Pokemon game is a completely normal difficulty level, because in a normal Pokemon game, you can just switch outside of battles, or heal outside of battles. You can do a lot of things outside of battles. But in Pokerogue, if you're playing on set battle, you don't ever have the option to switch your Pokemon unless it's in the middle of a fight, which means that there's always going to be a Pokemon taking damage. Which again, wouldn't be a problem in a regular Pokemon game, but here, where resources matter and every single bit of health that you lose from fight to fight is going to affect you in the long term, it's kinda fucking shitty that I have to take damage for any given reason. Especially when that given reason is, if I didn't do it, I would die. Considering that healing is really expensive and you only get a full heal every 10 battles, even taking a little bit of damage in the early rounds of a 10 battle cycle is just going to snowball into eventually you lose. Because if there was one genre that I would absolutely hate playing a roguelike for, it's an RPG. Because an RPG is a genre in which you are guaranteed to take some amount of damage, where that whole thing I talked about before, with how health basically represents how many mistakes you can make, that doesn't apply to RPGs, because you can make 0 mistakes and still take damage. So it's really hard to lose in Pokerogue and ever make any meaningful introspection about whether or not losing was my fault, because very often it feels like it isn't. I don't know if I just need to have better starters and then snowball the rest of the game from there, because I genuinely don't know what to do any differently than what I'm doing right now, or at least what I've tried right now. Even when I tried playing on Switch Battle, that didn't help because I either got a bad type matchup, or switching too much ended up not giving me enough EXP. or I ran out of money from buying potions too much, which you could argue was the mistake, is that I spent too much money on potions, but I can't justify not spending money on potions because there have been many a time where I've just gotten O-code because I had like 40 health, and maybe if I'd had 60 or 55, I wouldn't have died instantly. Who knows? To bring us to a slightly more positive note, you might be confused about the footage that you're seeing on screen, because I said not too long ago that I was done with Midnight Suns, that I wasn't going to bother playing it on PC anymore because it kept crashing, which is still true, because I'm not playing it on PC anymore. I got myself a version on console for the low price of like $10, because lucky for me and my wallet, everyone else thinks this game sucks. Which gave me a thought, which was that while it's not a nice feeling to have such a differing opinion from everyone else, to know that a game is good when everyone else thinks that it's bad, or the opposite, it's actually really beneficial for actually getting games, because if everyone else thinks a game is good, it's going to be a little expensive to buy, but luckily, you know it's bad, and you're probably not going to want to use money on playing it, so you're not going to have to buy it, and everything works out for everybody. But if you know a game is good, and everyone else thinks it's bad, then people will practically give it away just to get it off their hands, and then you're the only one left with a good game, and everything works out for everybody. I say all this to say, I'm pretty satisfied having gotten Midnight Suns, especially since I can add it to my physical collection now, and the game just runs way better on console. I have no idea why, it just does. The only thing I really have to comment on in terms of gameplay, because right now I'm just replaying all the parts that I already did on PC, is something that I don't think I mentioned in my initial Midnight Suns video, but that's because I probably didn't know about it, because the only reason I know about it now is that I happen to see it in a tooltip during a loading screen. Which is that the game claims to adjust enemy levels to your hero's levels whenever you go into a mission, but I call bullshit on that from my time playing on PC, because I remember many struggled missions with characters like Nico or Blade, who I just weren't using a lot, that were very underleveled and just had a horrible time in whatever missions I sent them on. So yeah, A, I call bullshit, and then B, even if that is true that they do adjust the levels, then what's the point of levels? I don't remember if I've ever talked about this in the bunker or not, but my perspective on level scaling in any game is that it is a redundant system, because the entire point of levels is that it's a linear scale of progression. You get levels higher than other things to be better than those things. If all the levels scale so that you're always on the same level as those things, then there's no point to the levels, because you're not improving if everyone else is improving at an equal rate. If you're at a 10 and you go to a 15, you didn't get any stronger if everyone else also went to a 15. It's one of those game mechanics that shows up in a lot of games that's really only there for capital G general audiences, because anyone with even half a mind would see level scaling and immediately know that it's all bullshit. But they put it in games to trick stupid people, because stupid people see numbers go up and think they're getting better when really they aren't. And as for the weekly topic, I want to talk about Death Stranding 2, specifically about the actors in the game, kinda specifically about Deborah Wilson, because we are once again in another woke discussion on Twitter.com, and like many discussions on Twitter.com, no one's talking about the actual issue. Deborah Wilson has not started mysteriously appearing in video games in recent times. She's always been a recognized voice actor. The only reason it feels like she has is because more and more games are starting to use her actual face in the games that she voice acts in, which is not a problem with Deborah Wilson or the hashtag woke or whatever. It's a problem with video games trying to be like movies. Naturally, this is an epidemic that games have been facing for a while now, but it only gets worse and worse every year, with more and more games trying to have more terror shits than the others, with entire trailers dedicated to how many testicle hairs we can count on the character's body. I find God of War 2018 and by extension Ragnarok to be very interesting games, but one of the things I hate about both of those games is how they don't allow you to skip the story, because goddamn, you just need to see that story, don't you? And no, I don't actually. I don't need my games to become like movies, I need my games to be more like games. That's not to say the games can't have stories in them, something I've said many times at this point, but stop trying to prioritize the stories because I'm here for a game. And then there's Hideo Kojima, who I am astounded is not pregnant by now from all the dick writing he does of actors. And Kojima's arguably the worst one when it comes to this bullshit. The whole putting the actors in the games, that's like the entirety of what Death Stranding was advertised upon. The making the games more like stories. I mean, have you played Death Stranding? Kojima wants to make movies, but for some reason he's compelled to make games. Which was great when we got good games out of him, but is less great when we don't get good games out of him, which we haven't gotten since Metal Gear Solid 5. Which, if you can believe it, was 10 fucking years ago. So to make a long story short, the only reason people feel like actors are appearing more and more in certain things is because, in a literal sense, they kind of are. But instead of arguing about bullshit that doesn't matter, maybe we should focus on the fact that games are becoming more like movies for the worse. I'm Lyle Gav, this has been Post Game Discharge, and get out of here.